Hello, everybody, and welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast with me, James Dickson, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you tune into today's podcast from today. And very apropos of a lot of work that I'm involved in behind the scenes at the moment, is the subject of sustainability, ESG, DEI, loads of these acronyms that fly around at the moment, but it's all linked to an ongoing and very, very important conversation relating to sustainability. And on the podcast today, we're going to be talking to arguably one of the somebody from one of the biggest companies involved in the global exhibition and events industry. It's a name that is synonymous with a lot of the work that listeners to this podcast do. They will have worked with them, they will have encountered them, they will certainly be aware of them at the very least. And they've been making huge strides over the last few years in developing and improving sustainability practices. And I'm saying stuff that, I know is the case, but our guest today is certainly going to give us a little bit more insight and in-depth analysis as to what they've been doing and how they've been going about their own day-to-day work. I'm delighted to say that joining the Event Industry News podcast today is the head of ESG at GES, Kate Holliday. Kate, welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast.
Hi James, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, and hopefully everything that I said there in the introductions is accurate and a fair reflection of what's been going off. I'm confident in saying that GES are easily one of the biggest names in the global exhibition and events industry. Everyone listening to this podcast today and watching this will have come across you at some point, but your role in GES is still relatively new, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about what you actually do within the organisation.
So I've been with the business just over 6 months now, and my role is to look at all aspects of the company to ensure that we are positioning ourselves and making sure that we are standing up correctly with regards to the environment, social and governance of how our business is set up in order to be able to move successfully and with force really within that transition to a sustainable future.
Absolutely. And I said that your job title was head of ESG, and I suppose that's the first obvious thing maybe to point out to people tuning in today is who maybe haven't come across ESG before is environmental, social and governance.
Yes. So you're looking at, sustainability has all multiple arms. So it is sort of looking at the environmental sustainability, the social sustainability, and then the governance that supports that structure that enables that the environment and the social side of things to actually really be cemented into the core of the business. So rather than just doing a few sort of initiatives here and there, actually what we're doing at GES is embedding it into our actual core of our governance of the company.
And there was, we're recording this for context on the 17th of September, which I think is important to mention because I have a press release here that I was sent this morning that was dated yesterday and relates to the significance of a data-led approach to ESG, reports, insights that you've been able to gather within the business over, I guess, that the last few months that you've been involved, but I would hazard that the data that's been generated clearly goes back beyond where you actually joined GES. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, well, a lot of people who are getting into the whole world of sustainability and reporting knows that data, there's a lot of it that we need to gather from multiple different areas. We're still very much on that data collection journey, but we have made a huge impression since I joined. And as you quite rightly said, some of that data had been collected prior to my joining. But what I've been able to do is actually make sense of it. So what does all this data actually telling us? How are we going to use it? How do we use that data to create our strategy and create our focuses moving forward? And that's really key. So it's getting the right data, making that relevant.
And interestingly, and I'm certain that there'll be a fundamental reasoning behind it, is a very specific element of the overall activity that's undertaken by GES is referenced within this press release. If I may, I thought it might be useful to actually just read verbatim,
Okay.
some of the first paragraph to give us our listeners some context. So, GES has called for greater investment into data-led ESG insight, having identified huge opportunities for the industry to improve its emissions reporting and understanding. Using event flooring as a clear case study, the business discovered that by collecting product-specific emissions data for event flooring, manufacturing emissions were up to 44% less than emissions previously calculated using standard Defra material emissions factors. So two key things in there that I took away when I read that prior to today's recording is you've looked at another set of data as opposed to this Defra material emissions factors that's referenced there. Can you explain a little bit about what the Defra emissions factors are and the sort of the difference between how you calculate it?
So the Defra emissions factors is great. I mean, what Defra have done is they've lumped lots of different products together. So if you're looking for polypropylene, that is a type of plastic. So therefore, they are making assumptions on how that is specifically manufactured to be that material. What we did is we actually invested in specific calculations on the products that we use. So we went directly to the manufacturers and found out how they did their specific manufacturing processes for some of our flooring materials, and then worked with an agency who was able to look at to develop a life cycle analysis to give us our cradle to gate analysis of some of our flooring materials. And that was really interesting to see that some of the manufacturing processes are very, very different depending on what type of product and what the end use is. So, for instance, rewind carpet uses a considerably less water and considerably less energy than other types of carpet, and that is one of the flooring calculations that we've been able to establish that have been independently verified as well. It's not just us saying we've gone out and done this data.
Yeah.
It does actually make a significant difference. And so that the reason why it's so important is that when you're calculating emissions on a show and you're going for that generic data from Defra, it is great. It gives you a guidance, but it doesn't give you the specifics. So when we then had got this data analysis done, we were really quite surprised at how different it was, and obviously very pleased that we were able to give our organisers that more accurate information on their emission calculations. And when you're looking at, sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say. So is that's been calculated across all of GES? How has it boiled down, sort of on a client basis, so a show by show basis? How does
we haven't done.
Work
we have only identified a number of products, materials that we use. So we haven't done it across the business yet. This is something that we will be looking at doing potentially moving forward.
Right.
We just did a pilot. So we took 5 of our flooring products and I think 7 of our graphics products. So our most used products, to basically get that clear understanding of what our environmental footprint is, really. So we now have that data. And what that's been really, really brilliant at is we can sit down with the organisers and say, right, if you make this decision, these are your emissions. This is how much weight it's going to be. This is how much transportation you're going to require. Whereas if you use this one, it's going to be either a lot more or a lot less, depending on which way you go. And then they can see that direct comparison at the time of ordering, rather than reporting on it post show. So therefore, we're saving the emissions before they've actually been used effectively, and that's kind of what we're wanting to do on more of our products. But it's a time-consuming and a sort of a considerable investment. So we are, looking at how we move that forward.
And what position to be in terms of choice for the end client?
Yeah.
In that, when I think, 10, 15 years ago, the choice would have been, do you want blue,
yes,
red, yellow? What colour carpet do you want? What type of flooring do you want in your, feature bar area on the show floor?
Yeah.
To be able to expand those choices to something that arguably is so much more pertinent to modern business, it is really sort of up to date, and as I said at the beginning, very apropos of much wider conversations that are going on in the events industry.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's great, and this is the sort of data that we all need to be getting a bit more invested in. And Defra is a brilliant tool and should be used where you don't have alternatives, because it gives us that guidance, it gives us that benchmark. But then I think we're finding a lot more manufacturers are investing in these life cycle analysis of their materials, which therefore then helps us to do that accurate reporting.
How many? It would be remiss of me not to ask how many events now are not even going down the flooring route. Is that also a viable option when it comes to emissions and sustainability targets, or are some events and some clients you work with, because of the nature of their event, really they have no choice but to put some form of flooring down?
I think it's about creating that experience, isn't it? I think that I don't think sustainability and embedding sustainability practices into your job should necessarily stop people doing certain things. I think it's about using innovation and technology to improve what we do and to help us reduce our emissions. It's a little bit like, going on holiday and flying. People still want to go on holiday, and people should feel like they can go on holiday and not feel guilty about it. But airlines are investing in new biofuels and technology that makes their emissions, a lot less. So technology plays a huge part in this. And a few organisers are making that decision not to go for carpet, but I think that then takes away a whole different aspect of an event. It takes away that sort of sense of occasion. It also does create some sort of issues with inclusion and diversity. So, halls are very echoey. They're not so easy to, navigate around. The experience changes quite dramatically by just taking that flooring out. And I think that that's something that needs to be seriously considered before those decisions are made.
In terms of how the data is collected and analysed, has the reporting process that you've gone through over the last few months opened up and created new ideas and new ways that actually operationally you can collect even better data? Has it opened up new avenues where we think, actually, if we did this, we would gain that?
Yeah, I think that the data is bringing up a lot of interesting things that you don't necessarily expect, and also things that are blatantly obvious until somebody actually looks at that data and collects it, you don't think about it. So one sort of calculation we've been doing is obviously our scope 1 and 2, and looking at our energy consumption, and looking at how much we actually use as a business. And how can we make those small changes? So, changing how we use our air conditioning units, and changing how we manage our computers, and looking at all of those things. We can actually, by understanding the data, we can make great, great investment decisions, because we're reducing our footprint in that area. We can then use the money that we've saved from that area into investing into other initiatives within the business that then help us to drive it forward. So the data across the business is showing us different trends, different areas of focus, which has been brilliant. It's really sort of helping us and drive our strategy forward.
And you have the scalability within an organisation of your size, of course, that, small changes to every person in the business that's got a laptop or a company mobile device, in terms of just how often they charge it, for example, small changes to each user in an organisation of your size is going to have a big impact. But undoubtedly as well, when an organisation like GES is publicly advocating and showcasing what you've done from a reporting point of view, that's going to have an impact on the wider industry as well, isn't it? Because you wouldn't make things like this public if you weren't proactively looking to spread this kind of message around the wider industry.
Definitely. And we're very proud of everything we've achieved, and we've got great ambitions moving forward. I think one of the things to be quite clear is that life has a habit of happening in different ways to how you expect. So we have set our sort of guidelines and pathway of where we're wanting to go, but inevitably, changes may happen, and our focuses may change a little bit over the next sort of 3, 6, 9 months, 2 years, or whatever. But fundamentally, we're sort of saying this is where we are, and this is where we're heading, and these are the ways in which we're getting there. And we're really excited about all of that, and how it's going to turn into sort of reality over the next few months and years.
And one thing that I wanted to touch on is relating to sort of the community and the conversations going beyond just sort of individual reports like this. And again, I have to give thanks to some of the notes and the information that I was given by our good friend Ali Turner ahead of today's podcast, and just reading one of the documents that I was sent is that there's a section entitled, increasing opportunities to expand community engagement and exciting ways in which businesses can contribute to social change. And it says that GES want to ensure that when they discuss ESG, those conversations go beyond sustainability and instead include legacy and tangible impact that each event can have on its immediate community. And when I read that, I instantly, rightly or wrongly, considered this wider impact and the wider understanding of what sustainability is. And I think that we've moved on as an industry in the last couple of years, particularly in our understanding that sustainability doesn't just relate to using electric vehicles, recycling coffee cups, and trying not to use single-use plastic. Sustainability is so much broader and wider, and will have long-term impacts on the relationships that we develop in organizations, on our ongoing efforts to improve and offer better quality of mental health within industries. There are all sorts of wider issues, aren't there, from a community-led point of view, that reports like this will impact on.
Absolutely. And I mean, social sustainability is something that we take very seriously, and we're actually in the process of developing a couple of programs for the communities that we work with. So it's our internal communities, our local communities, and obviously the events industry as a whole. How are we engaging with those different communities and putting what we have as a business out there to enhance those communities, and ensuring that events are full on experiences. Teams work a lot, really, really hard to make that event happen. One of the things I've always loved about events is that no matter what business you're from or where you are in the world, everyone comes together to make sure that event opens, and it opens brilliantly and it works well. But that takes a lot of manpower, a lot of effort, and sometimes a lot of stress. So how are we looking after our people? How are we supporting the communities around that? And how can we sort of learn from our experiences in order to make that more sustainable for our crew, our workforce moving forward, and for the industry moving forward as well.
And by community-led, I've always been curious as to whether or not events themselves can form better communities and improve their communications. And in a beautiful ideal world, you take a venue like Excel, for example, where you'll have an event that builds for 2 days, runs for 2 or 3 days, packs up, goes, returns it to an empty hall, and then a very similar sort of, on the face of it, show will come in, in terms of it requires a build, some theatre stages, with a totally different footprint. And I've always found, that as it says in one of your reports that I was given, is that, venues are very static, but events themselves are very transient. And that probably contributes to a massive amount of waste and carbon emissions, just even in a static venue, is the transient nature of building, running, knocking down, shipping out, and then building another one in the same place.
I mean, I think you're right, but I think at GES we've really sort of tried to do our best to sort of mitigate that by obviously having our warehouses and our offices located at Excel and the NEC. So, and I would say a significant, I don't actually know the percentage, but I would say about 90% of our products are reused. So we reduce that need to throw things away after a show, and we take them back with a very minimal transport, because we're on site at both of those venues, store them and then reuse them for another event. I think it's very, it's sad, it's difficult. Events, as we know, are every single one of them is different, and that
Mm.
creates that uniqueness for each of those events. And I think that being able to continue sort of having that uniqueness is brilliant. And I think looking at how we service those events has helped massively to reduce those emissions.
Yeah, and I've seen, firsthand, albeit on a smaller scale in comparison to the whole business of GES, but I've seen firsthand of how that they operate, and even small changes from what we used to call traditional shell scheme to some of the structures that are actually being used now, the modular structures that companies like GES can deploy now to build exhibition stands, for example. The amount of tools that are required to build them are much, much less, because they can all be installed and tightened and built together by hand. They're like big Lego sets, and even stuff like that has an impact.
Well, I mean, the other thing that nobody would probably be aware of is that our warehouse operations are amazing. They've upgraded in the last sort of year to 18 months. They've totally changed how we store and maintain all of our equipment on site. So and we have stillages that are color coded, so exactly what's in the stillages, how many of that particular item are. People working on site can see in the distance that the purple one is over there and such is in that one and the yellow one's there. So it cuts down a lot on not knowing where the products are. It makes the efficiency on site a lot better. It makes storing in the warehouse a lot more efficient and easier to navigate around, and also reduces the number of different types of storage we have in the warehouse. So therefore our operations become more efficient, our transport becomes more efficient, and then our on-site work becomes more efficient just by changing how we store and load things. So it's great. There's so many different things that you learn going through this process.
How much opportunity have you had to actually sort of be there and just watch and observe, and how important a part of that was that in sort of building your understanding and the reporting side of things over the last few months? Because we've spoken about the data and being able to look at the data and stuff that you could probably look at on a laptop from your office, at home or in the GES office, but how much of it was built about going on site and just observing?
So I think it's quite interesting actually, because I've worked in events pretty much all my career. So I've worked for big organisers, and so have been on the organiser side. This is my first time being on the supplier side. So all the things you take for granted as an organiser, you have no idea what goes into it behind the scenes. So actually moving to GES and sort of, you get a completely different appreciation for how an event is put together. As a show director that, you've ordered your shell scheme, you've ordered your carpet, you made all your last minute decisions, which has obviously driven the service provider crazy. I now know why it drives them crazy. I also know that increases the emissions of the show quite considerably for all those last minute decisions. And I understand the impact of all of that now. And sitting back and watching and listening and learning is a huge, it's a brilliant way to work. That's the way I prefer to learn about these things, because, someone can tell you anything until the cows come home, but actually seeing it in action, I think, is what makes the difference. And gives you context to the data as well. You can't just have a data sheet. Data is great, but you need to understand the context behind it.
No, absolutely, and and again, if I'm shouting anything here that's wildly wrong, shoot me down. But I'm thinking of such simple things that an organizer would do, like they might make 2 or 3 changes to their floor plan every week, and then communicate that back to their main contractor like GES. Now, the closer that gets to the show, if GES have presumably done their warehouse prep and they've got everything sat in crates, in pallets, etc., ready to go for that event, and they decide to make half a dozen changes to the floor plan, that could mean a dozen trips in a forklift backwards and forwards across the warehouse floor to repack those cases, to repack those pallets, whatever it may be. Those dozen trips in a forklift take up fuel to do that. All those sort of subtle little changes that we take for granted, that we think are easy. When you scale that up to the whole industry and the operation that GES are running, that's going to have an impact.
It does, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, it's obviously less emission intensive with NEC and Excel events, but if we're working at other venues around the country, you know that makes, it might be the difference between 2 lorries and 1 lorry, or you just don't know, and so I now know that all those annoyed conversations that I had with the service suppliers before actually means something. And I think it's kind of being, what I'd really like to do is we're a long way off, but I'd love to be able to calculate the additional emissions that those last minute decisions would actually cost,
Sure,
would actually be. But we've got more pressing things that we need to evaluate before we get to that.
Sure, and I guess it's something that just by highlighting, again, that there are probably a list of 100 things like that you could, if we sat here for a couple of hours, we could probably put together a fairly big list of subtle things or small things that every organizer could do slightly differently, that behind the scenes with their suppliers would make a big difference. But I guess just even if we can't calculate them at the moment, having that awareness and conversations like this in terms of raising awareness and wider awareness is a good thing, because if one person listening to this makes one small change or adaptation to their planning process, again, we're looking at how that affects on a wider scale. And I think that's a conversation that, as a general public, we've had in the last few years is, when you hear the government or people on TV and the media talking about emissions and global emissions targets and carbon footprint, is a lot of people will say, well, what difference can I make just by recycling a few tins in my correct bin? And it's no different to subtle changes in an industry like this or any industry, is that everybody making small changes does contribute.
Yes, absolutely. It really does make a difference. And if one show manager makes a decision to move from earth cord carpet to rewind, then that's loads of emissions saved. Across there, and then I think also the other interesting thing is to understand, getting the right data also helps people understand that those decisions, as I said, that carpet calculation the carpet calculator that we've created now, that we work with our organisers, really helps that decision-making process and shows them at the point of their decision on what are the best emission-friendly decisions are.
Absolutely. Well, one eye on time here, and there's something that I've got scribbled on my notes that I wanted to, and it's 2 words. It's graduate program, and I wanted to, your position, if I'm right in saying, is the first time that GES have had a head of ESG in the organisation. Is there a plan to increase the size of the team? Are you working on your own in that capacity, or do you have a team working with you at the moment?
So we are looking to potentially do a graduate scheme next year. We're also looking at working. We're also in the process developing a partnership with charity that will open up other educational opportunities for young people. So we are in the process of evaluating how we are going to do this moving forward. But we see that there's a real opportunity for GES and the industry to really engage young people and get them into our industry. The industry needs the new generation to get involved and excited in what we do. And I think that engaging with graduates and young people in different varying ways is something that we're very, very committed to doing.
And is there a more than a distinct possibility and opportunity there, given that the younger generation, and I speak from having 2 sons who are 21 and 18, on the face of it, seem to be taking the whole subject of sustainability certainly a bit more seriously. And I'm seeing a lot of young people with a real, desire to make to be socially responsible.
Yes, and that's one of the things that when we go back to the governance of the company, we have a environmental sustainability policy, we have our values, missions, and purpose that all relate to what we are doing as a business with regards to sustainability. our job descriptions go out now saying that, you know, everybody's responsibility is sustainability, and you are encouraged to bring this to the forefront of your role. We are our internal objectives have ESG as, you know, as part of what we expect our teams to be achieving on a regular basis. So I think when you have a generation of people who are committed or engaged in sustainability, it's really key that a company stands up to be counted, and that we embrace this within everything that we do. So yeah, we are, you know, as I said, the governance side of things is very, very key. You know, we're not just saying it in a progress report, we're actually doing it day to day in the business.
Absolutely. And again, with one eye on time, as we start to wrap up today's episode, important to point out that registration is now open for Event Sustainability Live. At Excel at the end of November. So please do head over to eventsustainabilitylive.com if you want to register and attend that event. Loads of exhibitors, but more importantly, a fantastic 3 theatres worth of conference content relating to the subject of event sustainability, within which, Kate, you're going to be participating in one of the sessions.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit or give us a couple of teasers about that particular session and what's going to be discussed.
So we're talking about data again, funnily enough, you know, and the impact. So actually, it would be a great sort of transition from this podcast to our session, which I think is at lunchtime on the second day of the event. So
I'm sure you're correct.
Yeah, well, I hope I'm correct. So come down and listen to us. We've also got a stand at the show as well, so there will be a whole GES contingent there to talk about ESG and all of the great initiatives that we've got in place at the moment and planning.
Excellent. Thanks for giving us a little bit of an insight into that. And just as I said to a few minutes ago, if you do want to come over and check out Event Sustainability Live, eventsustainabilitylive.com. Registration opened a couple of weeks ago, so you can now register to attend the event completely free of charge. It runs alongside Event Tech Live, so if you register up for either or of those shows, you can get access to the other show as well. And there's such a big tie-in now, because we've spoken for years in the event tech side of things about data and analytics and collection, and on the face of it, a lot of people said, well, you know, how's the sustainability show going to tie in with a tech-led sort of event show? And there's been no surprise to me, certainly in the team behind it, that actually there's all sorts of crossovers in that world now, given everything that we've spoken about today, and the data and the platforms that we use now, and the data that's available to us via some of the day-to-day operational platforms that we have can offer such an insight actually into sustainable practices, as well as what a lot of them are fundamentally designed to do. So I'm sure you'll agree with me, Kate, that there is actually quite a bigger tie than people may give it initial credit for.
I would say that definitely. Yes, you know, it'd be great to see people down there and obviously see where the conversation goes. You know, I think we touched on it earlier about social sustainability, and I think that's something that it is something that GES is really focused on moving forward. So I'll be looking forward to talking more about that in the future, and happily come back, James, and talk to you about that in a few months when we've got our plans a bit more firmly in place.
Please do. Whenever there's reporting, data, ongoing insights, I always say to people, you know, that this, you know, you've got to come back. You can't just say that we've done this initial report completely, and this is our findings. You know, we've got to look at this 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line to maintain a track on where it's going. So absolutely, open invite. Come back anytime. Great. And let's look at what's out there. So yeah, a couple of reminders for everybody: 20th and 21st of November, 20 and 21 November, Excel London for Event Tech Live and Event Sustainability Live. Registration for both of those events is open. Go to eventsustainabilitylive.com or eventtechlive.com to register for both or either one of those shows. By registering, you will get access to both of them. And just while we're on the subject of giving a couple of mentions out for websites, if you are listening to today's podcast via your podcast platform, please do head over to eventindustrynews.com to check out the latest news, features and special supplements that's available within the Event Industry News website. Of course, the A to Z supplier directory there as well. If you work in the industry and you're looking for a service or a specialist supplier, the chances are you will find it within the A to Z supplier directory on eventindustrynews.com, where you can also watch video versions of all of our podcasts. Of course, you may have started your journey there today and be watching this podcast. If you have, thank you very much for tuning in. Please do also go in the opposite direction. Search for the Event Industry News podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, and make sure that you're subscribed so that you get the episodes each week as they drop. My thanks at the end of today's recording to Kate Holliday, the head of ESG at GES, for joining us. Kate, it's been great talking to you. Look forward to seeing you on the show floor at Event Sustainability Live in a few months' time.
Great, thanks, James. It was lovely to catch up.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you on the next edition of the Event Industry News podcast. Goodbye.